So you're beginning a new project or you're modifying an existing plan. This video will take you through each step of the planning process, from designs, shopping lists, cutting, and assembling your materials. My name is Cassandra, and this is Citrus Cedar. If you're new here, welcome to my channel. This channel is about becoming a bit more self-sufficient through woodworking and gardening. And I am much better at woodworking than gardening. So the information that I'm going to give you comes from this book. This book is titled Space and Storage. This is a whole series from Home Repair and Improvement from Time Life Books. This one's on space and storage. Now there's a section in this book that is all about planning a project step by step. So I read this and I was like, wow, this is a good refresher for me, and I want to share this with you guys if you are new to woodworking and you're wondering, how do I even tackle a new project? So there's 3 questions you want to have answered when you start a project. 1 is, what are the dimensions of the project? 2, how will the parts be joined together? And 3, what materials can best be used in its construction? To answer these questions, we need to make build plans. So what do build plans need? Build plans need exact measurements. They need to include all parts, need to include all joints. They need to cover all clearances. So basically it needs to cover all the interrelationships of all the parts, while also keeping in mind the space available, adjacent walls and furniture if necessary. So once you make build plans, you'll get your first 2 questions answered. And this will also help you determine the answer for the 3rd question. So let's get into the first step, using design norms to determine dimensions. So in plans, you need to have precise dimensions that go by height, width, and depth. Now, some design norms you can use are that of the anatomy, based off of adult men and women. For example, a standard kitchen counter cabinet is 36 inches high and has a depth of 24 inches, which is a good ½ foot less than the average outstretched arm. This uniform design is used in most kitchens and built-in appliances, and that was designed with those norms in mind. Now, this is just a starting point, of course. You want whatever you're building, you want to build it to your needs and to keep in mind who is going to use it. It's always best to measure yourself or whoever is going to use it to ensure that it is the most comfortable for you and for the person using it. But to note, if you're going to use design norms for furniture, height is the most critical dimension to make it the most comfortable for people. So keep that in mind if you're building furniture. Some factors you can consider to help you determine final dimensions is, like I mentioned, who will be using it. If a child is going to be using this, and this is referenced, and a lot of this information is referenced from this book. If a child is going to use it, keep in mind that they grow 2 inches, about 2 inches every year, between the ages 5 to 16. Keep in mind space available. If you're building a storage cabinet, for example, what are you going to store in there? So it will be a good idea to take the dimensions of whatever items are going to go into your cabinet. Cost of material can be pretty pricey, so you need to determine what is your budget, and that will also play a factor in the final dimensions. Another thing to keep in mind is location. To avoid the classic dilemma, a man who builds a boat in his basement only to discover he has to tear down his house to get it out. So when you build something, wherever you're building it and from where you're going to take it to, make sure that you're able to move it to its new location. So take into account doorways, turning the object in hallways and in rooms. And if it's a big project, you're going to have to assemble it in its final location. When I was building dining booths, majority of them were going to be double booths. So a booth back to back. I was not able to have them assembled together like that upon delivery. I had to have all the booths delivered single to fit through the doorway to get into the restaurant, and then the final assembly I had to do there. So whatever you're building, just make sure that you'll be able to get it to where you're going, and if you need to, you can assemble it there to avoid a headache. Step 2, preparing the working drawings of your project. Now you can either do this by hand or you can use a 3D modeling program. I use a program Make by Me. It's free and I am not sponsored by them, although I would like to be. This is completely free and it's much easier to do than drawing things by hand, of course. You'll be able to create your idea and see it on the screen, and you can make all your mistakes there. You can see how to build it there, and you'll be able to see it from every vantage point. Top, bottom, sides, the back, everything. And this is crucial to seeing how the pieces come together. Now, if you want to draw your plans by hand, the easiest way to start is with graph paper. Let every square represent 1 inch, or however you would like, but 1 inch is easiest. And then for fractions, just approximate it in your drawings, but just make sure to have the actual dimensions written on the plans. The other thing is that if you are drawing, you also have to draw every vantage point. You have to draw again the top, the sides, the back. And if your structure has an inner box, if it's a box in a box, like a cabinet with a drawer, then you have to draw the inside drawer. So there's an additional drawing you would have to make. So we're very spoiled now and lucky to have 3D modeling programs to do this for us. Using a 3D modeling program can be intimidating. That's how I used to feel. For years, I never took the time to learn one. But I've recently begun using it this year after my last video where I talked to the camera. And I really pushed myself to learn a program. And you know what? I love it so much. It makes everything easier. I get to make mistakes on the computer and I can fix it then rather than in real life with real material. So it's a big advantage to use a program, and I will have more on that later. Also, when making your plans, also consider the thickness and width of your material. If it's something that's really wide, you're probably going to want to use plywood. You want to consider the thickness in certain parts of your build. If it is a part that is going to be a top, a bottom, a top, a side, a bottom, a shelf, for example, those parts are more critical and will bear more weight. So you want to use material that's at least 3/4 of an inch thick. Now for parts that aren't as critical, like the back of a cabinet or the bottom of a drawer, for those you can use 1/4 inch material. So it depends on the parts and something to consider when you are planning. Another important consideration in your planning is the actual size of lumber. Now we're going to go over nominal lumber sizes versus actual sizes, and this is in inches. So when you're buying lumber at the store, you're going to see numbers that you're familiar with, such as a 1x2, 2x4, 1x3, 1x6, and so on. Now those are nominal lumber sizes. Those are not the actual size. The parts of the build that don't require plywood, you are most likely going to be using softwood because they are more commonly available and they're much cheaper than hardwoods like oak, walnut, and mahogany. Why is it like this? It's long-standing custom by lumber associations, pretty much. The thickness and width of a piece of softwood, like a 2x4, that refers to the rough cut size of the lumber before it is trimmed to be smooth and square. So what you actually get at the store comes out to be smaller. So a 2x4 is really 1.5 by 3.5. Hardwoods is a bit different. Hardwoods are sold in exact inches, but the width is always different and varies board to board. Only the thickness is standardized in inches. Step 3, buying the materials that you need. All right, it's time to make a shopping list. There is also a lot of things to consider, a lot of considerations in planning for a project. Now, when you're picking out your material, such as your lumber and or plywood, if you're using plywood, consider where in the project will it be used. Are you going to see both faces and the end product? Is it going to be somewhere where it's going to be exposed to a lot of moisture? Then you'll need something that's exterior grade in that case. Now, there is a lot of information with plywood. Now, you're going to have to look into that. But I'm going to read you a few things from this book about plywood that I cannot say better. And a lot of this I am quoting from the book. So let's see. Plywood. Most plywood is a sandwich of thin sheets of wood called plies or veneers. The layers with grains run at right angles to each other are glued together under pressure at high temperatures. The result is a strong wood that is more warp resistant than lumber and can be used in large expanses. Each type has its own grading system, and there is a chart for that. And these are all the charts. So refer to these charts to get to know the different types of plywood, how they're graded, and what will be appropriate for your project. There is also a lot to consider when it comes to lumber. Now with lumber, it has its own grading system as well. You can buy lumber that is rough, so you're going to have to mill that yourself, or you can buy lumber that already has been milled for you. There are some that are S2S, there is S4S, S3S. So whatever is easier for you, I recommend doing that to not overwhelm yourself and to make your project move faster. So examine the charts, and this will help you determine what plywood or lumber is best for your project. Now a fun part. Now if you go to a lumber yard, some lumber yards will charge by the foot, but most charge by the board foot. A board foot is a square foot of lumber, normally 1 inch. Now to calculate board feet, you're going to let's take a 1x3 board that's 8 feet long. Let's start there. So you're going to take the thickness and multiply it by the width. So that would be 1 times 3, and that gives you 3. Now you're going to take 3, which is the total, and you're going to multiply that by the total length in feet. So 3 times 8, and that gives you 24. Now you're going to take that number, 24, and divide it by 12, which is a foot, and that gives you 2. So that board is 2 board feet. Now the lumberyard will do this for you, obviously, but if you want to see how much it's going to cost, that's the equation that you would follow. Okay, so now you took all that into consideration, you know what lumber, plywood you're going to buy. So now you need to consider how you're going to cut the material and cut it efficiently. So let's make a plan for cutting wood efficiently. If you started off with your plans by using a 3D modeling program, the program can do this for you as well. It's going to also give you the quantity of boards and plywood sheets you're going to need, and it can also show you cut diagrams. It'll show you how many pieces you can get out of the board or sheet. Very convenient, very time-saving. Now, you can also do this by hand. You can do what is called a cutting diagram. So we're going to use graph paper and a 4x8 plywood sheet as an example. When drawing a cutting diagram, you can be as rough or as detailed as you choose to be. This is very good to do when you have a plywood sheet to work with to ensure that you get the most out of your material, and also to get the most out of your lumber. Another thing to keep in mind in your drawing is saw kerf. That's the amount that you're going to lose in material when your blade cuts through the material. So arrange your pieces so that you get the most out of your plywood sheet and to cut the most effectively. So here you could cut right down the middle, and you might be able to just cut the rest at your table saw or at your chop saw. And if you have material left over, just mark those areas with an X to remind yourself that these areas are scrap. Okay, now that you got your material mapped out and how you're going to cut it and how much you're going to need, now you also need to take into consideration everything else you're going to need to build your project. So that includes nails, screws, glue, finishes, what else? Sandpaper, all that other stuff. Now, there are tons of nails and screws out there. When you go to the store, it is very overwhelming. I am always overwhelmed because I don't know enough about this either. Now you want the screw or nail to be long enough so that 2/3 of the shank will penetrate the second of the 2 boards that you're joining together. And make sure you're buying the right type of screw for interior, exterior, construction, what have you. There's a lot of things to consider about that too. So check out other creators on that one. Like this one. Now we're going to get into the last step, cutting and assembling the project. Oh, assembly is my favorite part, by the way. You finally get to see what you've been planning so hard, what you've been working so hard on finally come to life. I love assembly. You're going to use the plans that you made and follow the cut guide. Follow the cut guide in order. You want to label your cut guide That way you have a solid plan, and then you want to remeasure as you go to make sure that it is going as planned and you will have enough material. Also, I recommend label with painter's tape as you go so you don't lose track of what's what. I always label because I will forget and I will get confused. So make sure you're labeling your parts. Now, if you did buy rough lumber, you might want to start off with rough cutting and then cut down to your final lengths and dimensions. This is something you would have to have considered before in your plans because you're going to lose more material this way. I like to do this if I'm going to have a lot of the same dimensions of boards, then I'll rough cut first. So I'll take it down to about a ½ inch shy of final length. And then it brings all the boards into more manageable pieces. And then I can set up a stop block system. And then I could cut the groups of boards efficiently and consistently to get the same measurement. And this also allows you, if you're going to plane, for example, this also allows you to bring everything down to the exact same thickness and everything will be more consistent. So if you want to rough cut and bring things down to dimensions, consider that in your planning as well. Now for assembly, this all varies on what you're making, so I cannot tell you step by step, but I will give you some suggestions, and here are 6 of them. 1, only use wood glue if what you're joining is going to be a permanent bond. If you're not sure if it's going to be permanent, then just screw it together. That way you can take it apart and rebuild it if necessary. But if it is going to be glued together, make sure that you wipe off the excess glue immediately, or else the glue will go into the wood's pores and then that section will no longer be able to take stain. It looks ugly and it will not match the rest of the board. 2, if you're worried about how strong the joinery will be with glue and nails or screws, it is very strong. Glue with nails or screws is a very strong bond, and the parts itself will break before your joint breaks. 3, always pre-drill. You can also countersink your screws if you don't want them protruding. But please, 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 always pre-drill, especially towards the end of a board, or else your board will crack. 4, now this really depends on you and your preference, but staining and sealing or finishing the project's pieces before assembly might be easier than to do it after. An example is that when I made this really tall planner with a privacy screen attached to it, I assembled all of it, so I was sealing something that was incredibly tall when I should have done it in 2 separate sections at least. So consider the sizes and what will be easier for you in the end. Maybe you want to seal it now before you put it together. 5, clamps. You will find that you'll never have enough clamps. And that's just the way it goes. Eventually, if you keep doing woodworking, you'll accumulate more clamps. But I recommend at least getting 2 different sizes, something small, like 6 inches, and something at least 2 feet. Corner clamps. Corner clamps are extremely helpful with bringing 2 sides together, especially when you're working by yourself. So you might want to get some corner clamps. And finally, 6, take your time and roll with the punches. Now, when you're building and you have all these plans, things will probably still go wrong. Things that you didn't foresee. Just be patient and know that woodworking is problem solving. The more projects you do, the more experience you get. Things will get easier in some aspects, but there's always something that comes up that you haven't dealt with before. And it's just another learning experience. Yes, it can be discouraging and frustrating and can really upset you, but just stay calm and look at it for what it is and figure out how you can fix this, how you can solve this problem or issue. Challenge. Just think of it as a challenge. Don't think of it as a problem. Your mental state is everything. There's always so much to learn when you're woodworking. So just make sure to go with the process and to trust the process. Now, those were all of my suggestions. Now, if you have any for assembly or for anything that I covered, please put them down in the comments and so that we can help each other. So good luck with your project. I hope this video was helpful. Again, my name is Cassandra. Thank you for watching. This is Citrus Cedar, and please like and subscribe to this channel for more content like this. Bye. So there's 3 questions. So let's get into using design norms to determine dimensions. So this design is in most kitchens, and most built-in appliances went off. Oh my goodness. Try to think as yo, there's so much to read.